Okay, so factor by grouping. In factor by grouping, you need to group the first two terms and the last two terms. So that's the first two terms and then the last two terms. And you need to find the GCF for both groups. So for this first group, I have to figure out what goes into 10 and 5, the biggest number possible. So if I think about that, 5 is the only number that goes into both, other than 1. And then we also need to take a look at the variables. A to the third means A times A times A. A to the second means A times A. So I just look at what they have in common. So if I look at what they have in common, they both have A to the second power. Okay? So I'm also going to factor out A to the second power. Okay? And then basically I'm dividing by that 5a squared. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. And then a to the third divided by a squared. Or you can think about it as subtracting out those a squareds. I have 1 left over if I take away those 2. Okay. And then we move over to the next term. 5 divided by 5 is 1. And then I'm factoring out the a squared, which leaves me with no a's left over. Okay, now I go look at the second group and I try to find the GCF. So I look at my numbers. What's the biggest number that'll go into 4 and 2? So the biggest number possible is a 2. And then here's a trick with the signs. You kind of look at that first sign. Whatever that first sign is, you're going to factor that sign out. Okay, so it's always going to match that first sign. So don't pay attention to the second sign. So 2 is the only number that can go into both of those. It's the biggest number. So basically I'm dividing each term by 2 now. So 4a divided by 2 is 2a. And then 2 divided by 2 is 1. Okay. If you notice now, they both have the same factor. That should always happen. If it doesn't, you know you made a mistake somewhere. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to factor that 2a plus 1, that matching factor, so this guy and this guy, you're going to factor that out. So 2a plus 1 comes out. So it goes away from that term and it goes away from that term because you're factoring it out. And we're left with these two terms. Or 5a squared plus 2. Okay? And usually you'll be done. Sometimes you could keep factoring. If either of these are a perfect square, actually both have to be, and this is a minus, then you might be able to keep going. But since it's not, 5 is definitely not a perfect square, you're actually done. And this is your answer.